make beats, stay in the dungeon, don't leave.
Like,
You cannot leave.
Literally tense. Literally
You can't tell
tense.
anyone you're working on this project.
I was looking at that. If you're reading this moment, it's just crazy how the best moment of my life turned into like one of the most stressful moments of my life, you know?
Nah, this dude Drake was lying. So I had to let his fandom die down. If he wouldn't have came out and said I was lying in that moment, I probably would have got a chance to write a whole lot of more records for a lot of individuals. Drake definitely uses our culture to be able to win.
Ladies and gentlegrams, good news! Based off the events that recently transpired, it's looking like Rapaholics retired from unemployment and might just get hired as the new ghostwriter for the tired, tough-talking Toronto Taylor Swift, because there seems to be a rift and drifts with the man who manufactured the hits. You know when Kendrick told Drake to keep Beam close by? Well, new reference tracks have leaked, and now we know why. But in this video, I want to take it one step further and go through the precursor, the history of the sewer servers, the workers and lyrical murders in the OV host sweatshop. But first, bless a like and subscribe onto my head top.
I study
Rapaholics
for a living.
Now, ladies and gentlegrams, these days it seems like every couple months we get a brand new Drake reference track. Not just from the usual suspects like a Quentin Miller or a PARTYNEXTDOOR. No, these reference tracks range from a wide variety of different artists and different sounds. And it really puts one thing into question. With all these different artists penning these songs verbatim from the flow to the lyrics, the melody, the cadence, has Drake been the most overly assisted rapper of all time? Can we even call him a rapper with the amount of ghostwriters that have been cooking in the OV Ho kitchen?
I study
ghostwriters
for a living.
Well, according to Akademiks, it's not just Drake, but every rapper, your favorite rapper. Each and every one of them at one point or another has used a ghostwriter to pen a verse or even an entire track. Of course, when this brand new Drake reference track from a brand new ghostwriter just hit the internet, and we'll touch on that later in this video, Akademiks was on full damage control as the main man of the meat riding militia. After this new reference track got leaked online, he tweeted out, "You guys are just realizing now that no artist has lasted 10 years plus writing every single chorus and verse by themselves. Whoop-de-doo. Fans gotta get realistic. Every artist who makes hits over 10 plus years have utilized some help at some point. Yes, that includes Kendrick Lamar, Future, and Drake. Get mad." Someone responded to this tweet with a gif or a gif, I don't know how to pronounce that, of Jay-Z, implying that he lasted 10 plus years with no one writing his music, and Akademiks replied saying, "Don't let me break your heart." Someone else emphasized that there's a big difference between getting help on a hook, getting someone to even write an entire hook for you and just reciting that, versus having someone pen an entire song, putting their soul into those melodies, into the messaging, the entire concept, blueprint, and execution being crafted by another man, and then a different man reciting that same song word for word. Because that's what we've seen happen with Drake. These reference tracks are not a skeleton. They're not someone coming up with a little idea and Drake adding his own finishing touches. They're Drake reciting someone else's work. But of course, Akademiks can't stomach the thought that maybe the man he perceives as the greatest of all time wouldn't be so great without someone else writing the rhyme. So someone tweeted at him saying, "We don't care about getting help on hooks and bridges. When we start hearing reference tracks with rap verses though, that's when it gets cold." And Akademiks did some classic gaslighting, saying, "You sound like the same guys sound with the snitching conversation. Always jumping through hoops making excuses. Oh, this guy told, but nobody got locked up, so it doesn't really count as snitching. Stop it, bro. You can't limit help to what you think you're comfortable with." AKA, there's only black and white, right? If someone gets help with a hook, that means they have a ghostwriter. If someone talks to the police, that means they snitched. There's no nuance in the conversation, is what Akademiks is saying. But
I study for a living.
I want to bring a different perspective and some different nuance. Because of all those artists he named, Kendrick Lamar, Future, Drake, Jay-Z, who have lasted 10 plus years in the game, the same one Akademiks implies all had help in one way or another with a verse or a hook or a song. The only rapper we've ever seen to have this many reference tracks leak in this insane amount of quality and diversity of sound is none other than La Brianna Steak Gavel Guzzling Graham.
You know what it is, man. Fuck all y'all, man. For real, man. I see y'all boys outside when I see y'all, man. For real, man.
And if you guys don't believe me, I want to take you on a journey of nearly every year that Drake has been in the game, because in one way or another, with each moment he makes, every hit that he creates, there is another artist tied to that song. Let's take it all the way back to 2009. Well, actually, before we do that, let's keep it on 2025 for a second, because Lil Wayne's son had said in an interview this year that his dad, Lil Wayne, had wrote most of Drake's music.
Who's better, Lil Wayne or Drake?
Lil Wayne. My dad wrote most of the shit, so I mean, on God, like if it wasn't for my pops, then it wouldn't be no Drake, like for real.
And let me just clarify a little something here before all you guys say that I'm just here pushing Drake hate propaganda. I don't believe for 1 second that Lil Wayne wrote all of Drake's bars, alright? There were videos of Drake from the Degrassi days where you could see there's notebooks in his mother's house in Toronto.
I do music. These are full from front to back of just songs, pages and pages of lyrics and ideas, something that I'll probably never use.
Back when Dr. Dre was at the Pop-Out concert introducing Not Like Us, before Kendrick performed it, Drake, out of spite, posted an old business invoice he got from like 2007 when he was invited by Dr. Dre to be a part of some writing session. And even Lil Wayne himself, in the first song he ever did with Drake, he announced that him and Drake had both wrote on Dr. Dre's long-anticipated Detox album.
And me and Drizzy both wrote on Detox.
And if you pay attention to the subject matter within Drake's early music, it doesn't sound like Wayne's pen. It doesn't sound like his lived experiences. But best believe there is a little asterisk here. Drake met Lil Wayne in late 2007 after Jazz Prince Jr. had played Wayne some of Drake's music. By that point, Drake was about 2 mixtapes deep, gearing up to drop his third with So Far Gone. Drake spent a lot of time studying Lil Wayne all throughout 2008 in the biggest mainstream peak of his career. He was there when Wayne was gearing up to drop the Carter 3. On his song From Florida with Love, he reminisces on Kobe Bryant pulling up to Wayne's tour bus and Wayne handing him an iPod with the unreleased Carter 3 album on it before it hit the stores, and they officially signed the dotted line somewhere around mid to late 2008 for Drake to officially join Wayne's roster on Young Money.
Oh, Lil Wayne's just too good. Oh, Lil Wayne's just too good.
Around this same time in March of 2008, Wayne is on his massive mixtape run, doing 1,000 features, making your song his own if he hopped on it, mixtapes after albums after leaked projects back to back to back. And on one of those leaked projects came a song called Do It For The Boy. I'm going to try and play you guys a little snippet of that song if we don't get copyrighted right here. And if I couldn't play it, go look it up for yourself and tell me, does that melody, does that sound, do those lyrics sound a little familiar to you? Well, if they did, that would be because a couple months later, in 2009, Drake would officially take off as the flagship artist on that Young Money roster with his breakout hit, Best I Ever Had. We could do it real plenty bigger than you ever done it. This song launched Drake into superstardom almost immediately, becoming the fastest song by an artist who has never had a Billboard chart appearance to hit #1 on the Billboard Hot R&B and Hip Hop Songs chart. And I mean, numbers don't lie, and I think that one completely puts it into perspective. Drake was the fastest rapper who had never been on the charts to rise to #1 on the charts. And with the song becoming a massive success so early on in Drake's career, it was no doubt that he was showered in not just donut glaze from Snackadiddler and Ovi Home Mall, but also in awards from all these different award shows. And this was way back when award shows were still televised, television was still a big thing, so these awards definitely felt like a bigger moment back then, and winning one was obviously a very significant accomplishment, especially for such a new artist. Here's where it gets weird. The BMI Awards roll around in September of 2009, and this random artist by the name of Kia Shine was very excited on the red carpet, announcing that he was ready to go pick up his first BMI award for a song he co-wrote with Drake called Best I Ever Had.
I co-wrote the Best I Ever Had with Drake and those guys or whatever, so I'm here to win my first BMI award for that, so that's pretty much what's going on with your boy.
Now, at this point, everybody's like, what the hell does this guy have going on, right? Because there was never a co-writer announced on this song. Drake always made it seem like it was his own song. And Drake didn't even know this guy. So how was this guy somehow involved in Best I Ever Had, Drake's first hit? Well, Kia Shine would go on to take things a step further and say that he didn't just co-write the song, he actually owns 25% of the record. So now it's really like, okay, what is going on here? Is this guy full of crap? Because we've never heard of him before. Drake is getting all the praise for this song. Kanye West just did the music video for it, but now you're telling me there's a guy in the shadows that actually was responsible for writing the freaking thing and has 25% ownership of it? You gotta think, he must have had a massive hand in that song, in creating it, because Drake was signed to Lil Wayne's Young Money label, which was signed under Cash Money, which was signed under Universal Music Group, which meant that there was many hands in the pot of the profits of Best I Ever Had. So for that guy to take that massive of a chunk, 25%, means that he must have had a pretty significant hand in creating the freaking thing. Well, a couple days later, again in September of 2009, Drake gets on his website and makes a blog post that says, "There have been questions posed to me over the last few days about the writing of Best I Ever Had, and I'd figured I'd take the time to clear the air directly. I have never met Kia Shine or worked with him. I wrote the entire composition of the song in Toronto, and I borrowed one line from a Lil Wayne song that Kia Shine produced the beat for. The claims of 25% ownership of the song are false, and for an artist to brag about splits on a song is distasteful to begin with."
Embarrassing.
So remember earlier in this video, I played you guys the 2008 Lil Wayne song, Do It For The Boy. Drake is claiming he borrowed one line from that song to create Best I Ever Had, and he tries to downplay Kia's involvement in the entire process, saying that Kia Shine only produced the beat for the song. He didn't write the hook that Drake later redid for Best I Ever Had. Well, this is a bad look for Kia Shine, because now he looks like a liar, right? He's at these award shows collecting awards saying that he co-wrote this song with Drake. Drake is saying he's never even heard of the freaking guy before. So obviously Kia had to come out and clear up some of the backlash, because if you're trying to get your foot into the industry and you get your first big look on a massive hit like Best I Ever Had, but now the guy who actually sang the song is completely disowning your involvement from it and claiming that you're lying about the actual splits that you have from the song, no one in the industry in the future is going to want to work with you. You seem like a liar. So Kia had to respond to the backlash, where he said, "Because I did a record for Lil Wayne called Do It For The Boy, which was on the Leak mixtape back in October, my dude DJ Absolute and Enough were spinning the joint in New York. I gave Wayne the song back in March of 2008, and I had yet to hear the completed version until DJ Absolute had hit me. Actually, he was in the office with my man Darrell Jones at Atlantic Records. He wanted to buy the song from me to use for Jaheim. I tried to contact Young Money to get paid for the original track that I did with Lil Wayne before I made a move on actually selling the song, but I couldn't get anyone to reach back out to me from there." And remember, at the time, this Do It For The Boy song that Kia Shine claims he wrote for Lil Wayne, that was on a mixtape. So Kia leaves a little warning to producers out there. He says, "As a producer, it's tough with mixtapes these days. You might make a beat and a hook and put it on a CD to shop around to different artists and labels, and the next thing you know, one artist, in this case Lil Wayne, will rap on your beat, and then boom, now it's on the radio. And it's really impossible for Wayne to do a mixtape track, because if the song is a hit, it's going to end up hitting radio no matter what. That's why whenever I produce or perform on a record, I immediately send it to my guy Manny on the publishing side to handle all the paperwork." Basically, what he's trying to say here is, like, as a producer who's relatively unknown, especially when you're shopping around your beats, you're trying to get a big look, but you hand over your song to someone like Wayne, who ends up putting the song on a random mixtape, that song could blow up whenever and however. And you might think that it started off on a free mixtape, but then all of a sudden it ends up on the radio because a guy like Wayne has huge publicity. If the song is good enough, it's going to find its way to becoming a hit single. Look at the song Steady Mobbin'. That's one of Wayne's biggest hits. That started off as just a Lucy cut that leaked online. And if you're the producer in that case and you don't have your paperwork in order and you don't know Wayne, you don't have any ties to Universal or Young Money, and the song ends up blowing up, it's going to be very hard for you to get in touch with the right people and get properly compensated, right? Because the song didn't start off as something where you already had the numbers in order, because it was just some random free song. So in this case, Kia Shine took the proper protocols to make sure that he had the paperwork right for that Lil Wayne record that he wrote, right? And it's very smart that he did, because although that Lil Wayne song didn't blow up, Drake ended up rewriting the words and the melody to that Lil Wayne record and completely redoing it for Best I Ever Had. And because Kia Shine had his affairs in order, he was able to get paid what he was owed. He continues explaining, I get a call from DJ Absolute and he's like, yo, you sold the song to Drake? I'm like, who's Drake? DJ Absolute sent me the joint in January, the Best I Ever Had joint, and I'm like, wow, Drake sampled the melody, some of the words, the cadence, etc. So because I had already registered the original song, the Lil Wayne song, my business was in order. I sent in the Drake record and let my legal team handle it from there. We were able to settle at 25% of the Best I Ever Had publishing. It's a blessing, but the moral of the story is to follow up to get your dollars up, and always be prepared and on top of your business. People should really read my discography and they would understand that this is in no surprise. They will respect my mind and my grind soon enough. And I just thought this story was interesting for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, remember how Lil Wayne's own son had said that Lil Wayne wrote a lot of Drake's records. While that's a very bold claim to make, we do know that the song that ushered Drake into the game was, at the very least, you can call it an interpolation of another Lil Wayne song. That wasn't even actually written by Lil Wayne. And the saddest part is that Drake tries to kind of brush Kia Shine off to the back burner to this very day. And you can still hear 2025 interviews where Kia Shine is talking about how he really disapproves of the way Drake handled the entire situation, especially considering the fact that, again, Kia Shine had a massive hand in actually penning the very lines, the very flows that Drake used to actually take his career to the main stage.
I was ahead of my time with the way I was able to get my publishing business together with Drake. So I had to wait for the public to catch up to the fact that, no, this dude Drake was lying. Drake called Shine a lie, but really Shine was telling the truth. It's very much true. And Drake said it was fake. So I had to let his fandom die down so people to be able to see, like, bro, dude was telling the truth. If he wouldn't have came out and said I was lying in that moment, I probably would have got a chance to write a whole lot of more records for a lot of individuals. Drake definitely uses our culture to be able to win.
But it didn't stop there. By 2010, Drake is already a full-fledged superstar, and remember how I said Kanye West was directing the Best I Ever Had music video? Well, now he was actually penning full songs for Drake. The next biggest hit that Drake had after Best I Ever Had came in 2010 with Find Your Love. Now, yes, I know there's a big difference between a ghostwriter and a co-writer of a record, right? And on Find Your Love, you have Drake himself, Kanye West, Jeff Basker, and No ID, who are all credited as writers on the track. However, when you have instances like the Kia Shine situation where Drake doesn't even want to acknowledge the fact that he had involvement in the creation of that song, and then later in this video you'll see that every single year there's another artist who, in one way or another, in some capacity, lent Drake lyrics for one of his own songs. And when you see the quotes from the actual co-writers of this Find Your Love record, you guys tell me, to what extent of collaboration do you feel like is really pushing the line into full-on just ghostwriting territory?
I study
ghostwriters
for a living.
So Jeff Basker, one of the co-writers of Find Your Love, he also worked on All the Lights, a bunch of iconic records with Kanye West on 808s and Heartbreak and My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. He described the creation of the song Find Your Love by saying, I think No ID had the drum beat, and that's the classic just, Jeff, jump on the piano. And Kanye had started humming in my ear. We started coming up with a melody, I started crafting the music, and we wrote that relatively quickly, within an hour. No ID commented on the song saying, we did a few records for Rihanna, and two of them became Run This Town and Drake's Find Your Love, aka the Find Your Love song was originally meant for Rihanna. And Drake even spoke on the song, saying that it was a step in a different direction in terms of the subject matter that he usually approached on his records. He said Find Your Love is an extremely vulnerable song. It almost feels like a song that should be performed by a woman. Now, I'm not accusing Drake of having zero contribution to the actual writing of this record. However, it's a little interesting that there's 3 co-writers aside from Drake, and all of them had actual memories and quotes directly attributed to the creation of the song, versus Drake just basically saying that the song was out of his comfort zone and felt like something that should have been performed by someone else of the opposite gender. So now you have 2 of Drake's biggest hits by this point in time that carried heavy assists by other artists. Again, Best I Ever Had with Lil Wayne and Kia Shine, and then Find Your Love with Kanye West, Jeff Basker, and No ID. But nothing would compare to what we would see in 2011. By this point in time, Drake is trying to incorporate and establish a darker, more signature, unique Canadian R&B sound into his music. And this is when he comes across The Weeknd. The Weeknd was homeless in Toronto, a young aspiring artist singing on the streets, when he was introduced to Drake by one of their mutual friends.
Happy birthday birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Gambino. Happy birthday to you.
Drake and him start getting to work on some music, with Drake even attempting to sign The Weeknd, and of course coining the term OVO XO. And with Drake needing a little bit of a rebranding, with his debut album Thank Me Later being a little bit of a forced commercial effort, having this underground, angelically voiced, incredible songwriter in his circle was the perfect assist to create one of the greatest rap R&B hybrid albums of the 2010s. Yes, I told you, we'll give Drake credit where it's due. Take Care was an amazing project, but was that solely thanks to Drake? Or was that thanks to the help and influence and even full-fledged songs that The Weeknd handed him for the album? The Weeknd is only credited on 6 songs on Take Care out of the 20-song track list. Shot for Me, Cameras / Good Ones Go interlude, Practice, Crew Love, and The Ride. That's actually 5 songs I can't count. And initially when Drake was asked about integrating The Weeknd into this project, he said, "The Weeknd's like a writer, collaborator on 4 songs on my album. I usually don't branch out writing-wise, but we get it. We try to tap into the same emotions because we're from the same city." But years later, when The Weeknd and Drake would split up, The Weeknd would sign his own deal with Republic Records, which left Drake a little salty. That's a story for another video, because we know, of course, at this point in 2025, the two don't really get along. However, it really all roots back into how The Weeknd reflected on his contributions to Take Care. On one end, he had some positive words for Drake, calling him his closest friend in the industry at the time, and saying, "I'll always be thankful. If it wasn't for the light he shined on me, who knows where I'd be? And everything happens for a reason. You never know what I would say if this success wasn't in front of me right now." But as far as what else The Weeknd had to say, he claims that he actually gave Drake half of the songs that were meant for his initial debut, House of Balloons, for Drake's own album, Take Care. "I was hungry," The Weeknd said. "I was like, dude, take anything. I gave up almost half of my album. It's hard." And again, yes, it was a mutually beneficial relationship, but you have to remember the fact that the core elements of Take Care sound, arguably Drake's best project, at least perceived by the public, was inherently created for The Weeknd's own album and was simply just given to Drake, gifted to him. And you'll see that's a repeated habit throughout Drake's entire career going forward. Another repeated theme you'll see is OVO 40, Drake's right-hand producer, defending him in very similar ways whenever these ghostwriting allegations come up. In terms of The Weeknd, 40 said, "There are 18 other songs on Take Care where that guy was nowhere to be found, right? So it's like, yeah, cool, you contribute to a few records on Take Care. Significant records, sure, but it was a few. It wasn't a lot. It's a common misconception. I made that whole Take Care album. I only saw The Weeknd for maybe 2 days. No pun intended. I was in there for like a year." You'll see he has the same excuse when the Quentin Miller rumors start coming out. Basically saying, I created that whole If You're Reading This Is Too Late project with Drake. I only saw Quentin Miller in there for like a day. Just overall trying to downplay their contributions. And Drake would do the same. When he was pressed about it after celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the album on Instagram, some fan had commented something along the lines of, "You should thank The Weeknd for the success of this project." And Drake snapped back, replying to that fan saying, "The Weeknd co-wrote on Shot for Me and Practice. Obviously, he was featured on Crew Love and The Ride, and that's it. There's 20 songs on that album. Don't try me."
Spicy.
Alright, Drake, we won't try you. Instead, we'll move on to your next album, Nothing Was the Same. We gotta skip 2012 because Drake didn't release an actual album that year, but every time he does release a project, he's got one massive hit on it that usually seems to have large contributions from another writer. In this case, it was Just Hold On, We're Going Home, which featured Majid Jordan. They were actually singing on the outro of that song, but what many people don't realize is that they had a larger contribution to the overall record than you might think. They're listed as co-writers on the song, and they also co-produced the record. Sound familiar? The exact same situation to Kia Shine way back with Best I Ever Had, except this time Majid Jordan was actually involved with the OVO camp. In fact, they actually signed to OVO, unlike The Weeknd. They sat down for an interview to detail how that song came about with Hot 97, and Peter Rosenberg had asked them, was it hard because some artists, feel a little insecure about giving up a record that they know would be a hit? And the two members of Majid Jordan had answered saying the song wasn't actually done when they initially linked up with Drake and his team in the studio. It was the beginning of 2013, Drake was in the initial recording process of Nothing Was the Same, and they brought Majid Jordan into the studio. Majid Jordan describes it as basically a camp. There were tents set up, literal tents to sleep in, and I mean, they're joking throughout this part of the interview, but subconsciously it kind of makes you wonder how intense these conditions really were. They describe the vibes as, make beats, stay in the dungeon, don't leave, you can't leave. There were literal tents. You can't tell anyone you're working on this project.
Make beats, stay in the dungeon, don't leave. You cannot leave.
Literally tense. Literally
you can't tell anyone you're working on this project.
And they were literally sleeping in these tents, and in one of the sessions, they helped concoct the beat, and they said they wrote all of the words to the record. Then the other member of Majid Jordan had sped up the overall song. Then they gave it to Drake on a USB. He drove home to it, he loved it, and the next day, he recorded the whole record. Again, it's important to note that they have nothing but positive things to say about their experience working with Drake. They say they have been in the studio working with Drake closely, so it's not just like they chucked him records and he was going home and then laying them down the next day if he liked them. But with that specific record, Hold On We're Going Home, his biggest hit off Nothing Was the Same, and his biggest hit with Majid Jordan, for that particular song, they laid the process down as they just made the track, wrote the lyrics, Drake went home, he liked it, and he recorded it the next day. And you might be saying, but Rapaholics, this is an R&B record. It's okay for R&B artists to get reference tracks, to have other people writing their songs. I agree, but when you're calling yourself a rapper, an MC, there's a fine line in terms of how often you could be doing this, right? And we already saw 4 examples from 4 of Drake's biggest hits up to this point in 2013, where it seems like he had little to no actual involvement in the writing process of those records. And then 2014 would roll around, and while Drake didn't drop an album that year, he did have his most blatant attempt at theft of another person's record, and this time it was a full-on hip-hop track. YG had released the song Who Do You Love with a verse from Drake in late 2013. And when the rapper Rappin' Forte had caught wind of the record, he tweeted out, "In this song, Drake copies my lyrics and lines from my Players Club song, and he pays no homage?" Huh? Now let me read you guys a couple of the bars from Drake's verse versus Rappin' Forte's verse, and you guys tell me if you see the similarities. This is Drake's verse. "I got a shorty named Texas, and she got a buddy named Young JB, and now you know the deal. We turned up in the studio late night, that's why the songs that you hear are coming real tight." And Rappin' Forte raps, "I got a HOE named Real to Real, she got a buddy named SP12, now you know the deal. We gets freaky in the studio late night, that's why the beats that you hear are coming real tight." Then Drake raps, "OVO crew, I thought I told you. If you're a player in the game, this should hold you. And man, shut my guy Game, he just rolled through, eating crab out in Malibu at Nobu. A lot of fools putting salt in the game until these women get the notion that they run in the game." But Rappin' Forte raps on his own record, "Something to roll to, something to stroll to. If you're a player in the game, this will hold you. Mo money for the bankroll. Stick to the script, don't slip in the 9-4. A lot of fools putting salt in the game till where these women get the notion that they run in the game." This isn't an interpolation, this isn't homage, this is Drake verbatim basically copying word for word this guy's verse on his own song that was released 20 years before the Drake song. Rappin' Forte took legal action, and in 2014 it was alleged that Drake had settled a dispute with Rappin' Forte to pay him $100,000 for ripping off his lyrics. But in 2018, Rappin' Forte's manager would say that Drake never made the phone call to him or the full payment. He said, "You jack a person's lyrics and you don't even make a phone call? What type of game is that? He never made so much as a courtesy phone call." So we should have known the signs were here all along when we finally got the biggest bombshell of a ghostwriting allegation against Drake the next year in 2015. I covered the entire Quentin Miller story front to back in one of, in my opinion, the best videos I've ever put out, but unfortunately YouTube had demonetized it. So if you guys go ahead and watch it, I guess that's my donation to this YouTube game, because I spent like a week on that video and they demonetized it because I played a little snippet in the video of Drake recording in the studio and he was like cursing and all that. So they said that it wasn't suitable for advertisers. Anyways, that's my problem, not yours. I say that to say I'm not going to dive too deep into the Quentin Miller story story because you could catch that 1 hour, 15-minute breakdown that I did on the channel in the past. But this is really where the mask was unveiled behind Drake. This is really where we saw, in the most direct way possible, that Drake has flat out writers creating songs front to back that Drake just goes in and raps himself word for word. And the goalpost has shifted a million times in Drake's career. First it was, oh, it doesn't matter if he gets a little help on a record or two. Oh, then it doesn't matter if it's an R&B record and he's getting help on that. R&B writers have demo tracks all the time. Once the Quentin Miller allegations came out, then it was, oh, it doesn't matter if it's a club banger, if Drake is rapping over a track that is just meant to bump in the whip. It's not a personal record. On his personal records, surely he's the one writing those, right? All I'll say is that if you look at if you're reading This Is Too Late track list, you'll see there's 17 songs on there. Quentin Miller had a hand in writing 6 of the 17 tracks. Energy, 10 Bands, Know Yourself, No Telling, 6 Man, and Used To, allegedly. Meanwhile, PARTYNEXTDOOR actually wrote word for word 2 tracks, allegedly, with Legend and Company. That was 8 of the 17 songs on this project that were confirmed to have been written by someone else, allegedly. Not to mention the verse that Drake rapped word for word that Quentin Miller wrote for the song Rico that was on Meek Mill's album. And you might be saying, but Rapaholics, this is not ghostwriting. Quentin Miller was credited as a writer on the project. Well, my fellow YouTuber Charles Brown, he had a great take in my opinion on this situation. If you have to go digging through the album credits to try and find the name of some random artist who barely anyone knew at the time to see if they wrote the record, and you still don't get confirmation of what their actual contribution was to the song, then yeah, while it might not technically be ghostwriting, you're still deceiving your fans into thinking you penned that whole record, because we don't know who Quentin Miller is. We don't know, even though he's credited as one of the writers, what his actual contribution was to the record, and you're not coming out and letting us know the actual hand that he lent in the recording process. And the saddest part of all is that once he was exposed to be the writer for most of the biggest bangers on this album, he didn't get the credit or the shine that he deserved. Instead, when everyone was celebrating the 5-year anniversary of the If You're Reading This Is Too Late project, he made a video on Instagram saying that this was one of the darkest periods of his career, saying that Drake cut off communication with him after Meek Mill exposed the entire situation, and that the process came about because he was also working with DJ Drama at the time, trying to actually take off his own career as a solo artist, and he was playing some of the reference tracks he wrote for Drake to DJ Drama in the studio, and somehow they ended up leaking out to the world.
I was looking at that. If you're reading this moment, it's just crazy how the best moment of my life turned into like one of the most stressful moments of my life, you know?
And he emphasized, besides the song No Tellin', ironic title, but that was the only song off that project that him and Drake were actually in the studio cooking up together side by side. The other records, 10 Bands, Know Yourself, Rico, all these other songs that Quentin Miller wrote, he wrote those songs in full himself and just sent them over to Drake, hoping that Drake would take them. And eventually, when Drake caught on to his sound, he ended up renting out studio sessions in Atlanta for Quentin Miller to specifically pen music for Drake. Similar to Majid Jordan, he had these studio camps set up where writers would go in and pen him records, specifically writing songs for Drake. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the Dram Cha-Cha Hotline Bling drama. I have another full video on that. Maybe you guys can check it out in the link in the description. I'm also not going to bore you with Future writing the song Feel No Ways off Drake's 2016 album Views. I'm also not going to bore you with the entire controversy surrounding Drake stealing XXXTentacion's entire flow off his song Look at Me for Drake's own song from his 2017 album More Life. But these are just other cases in the years that would follow of Drake taking a little bit more than just inspiration from another artist for his own music. But then we get to 2018, another big year, because this is when Pusha T questioned Drake's pen. On Infrared, he kicked off his beef with Drake, questioning his pen, rapping, "How could you ever write your wrongs when you don't even write your songs?" And it was written like Nas, but it came from Quentin. Drake would rebuttal that on his diss track Duppy Freestyle, where he said, "So if you rebuke me for getting some help on a couple of V's, what do you got to say about the guy that's making your beats? I did things for him you would never believe. Father had to stretch his hands out and get it from me," implying that he wrote a lot of Kanye West bars. Only difference is Kanye West never tried to put on the front like he was writing all of his own music himself. And even with Kanye, we never saw the same quantity of reference tracks leak out of Kanye West's camp as we have from Drake's. Because this is where the reference track saga goes into full effect. After taking the loss to Pusha T in that rap beef, beef, Drake's back was against the wall, and he had to show the world that he could handle that L with distinction, if that's the right word. So he gave us his Scorpion album, and half of the tracks on that project were directly aimed at reflecting on and dissing his ops, Pusha T, and Kanye West. A notable standout was the song Mob Ties, where Drake's back was against the wall and he reflected on how sick he was of the guys that were trying to attack him. And remember, the goalpost was now moved by the OVO meat riding militia to where it doesn't matter if Drake gets help on R&B records or pop records or even club bangers, but if you start having writers pen up your most personal records, that's where it seems to be a problem. Even one of his biggest glazers, DJ Akademiks, had said he's okay with the reference tracks for the fun songs, for the lighthearted songs, but when it comes time to Drake really penning how he truly feels in that particular time, certain songs would devastate him if he ever heard a reference track for them. And he specifically named that Mob Ties record as one of the ones he'd be really sad about if it ever came to light that Drake had help on it.
I did hear about that maybe he got some help on Mob Ties, and I ain't gonna lie, Mob Ties was a song that I felt that was Drake with his back against the wall, and I was like, yo, Drake, man, right? It felt away. That would hurt my heart. Now, back to back, I'd be devastated.
Well, funny enough how the tables turn, after his beef with Kendrick, we would get the full-fledged reference track for that very song, Mob Ties, which was completely written by a separate artist, Vori. And unlike the rest of the reference tracks we heard, whether it was Party Next Door, Quentin Miller, whoever, this reference track was very disturbing. It had the exact same soul that Drake put into his own version of Mob Ties in the reference track itself. With the Quentin Miller records, you could kind of tell that he was just kind of writing these as sketches, not a lot of emotion put into them because he knows that they would just be given to Drake to actually record the final product. But with Mob Ties, you could hear Vori stretching out his vocals the exact same way Drake does, rapping with as much, if not more soul than Drake was on the final version. And again, word for word, pretty much, every bar on that Mob Ties song was written by Vori. I'd play you guys the song, but we'd probably get copyrighted. I actually suggest you check out the reference track because it really hits hard. Like, again, you hear a lot of emotion in the guy's voice as he's singing these bars that would then go on to be rapped by Drake. Literally everything down to the ad-libs. It's crazy. And that wouldn't be the only reference track from the Scorpion album that would leak. We would also get the Party Next Door reference track for the song Ratchet Happy Birthday. And if you guys don't like Drake singing on that track, I also suggest you check out the Party Next Door version, because just like with Vori, Party Next Door was singing that reference track with a whole lot of soul. And I just say that to say, again, it's one thing to get help with a couple of melodies or a couple of bars, but when you have someone literally chefing up an entire song for you, every aspect of it, and you're literally just copy pasting it into your own voice, I don't know. Like, how would I be able to call myself the greatest YouTuber on the planet if I had someone else writing my entire scripts for me and I was just reading them off word for word? And by the way, don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate you guys if you made it this far in the video. We still got a long way to go in terms of the ghostwriting journey of Drake, but I actually freestyle all these videos. Very seldomly or rarely will I actually write down a couple scripts, but for the most part, when you hear me speaking, it's literally just me speaking. Drop a comment, maybe I'll start a separate channel where I show you guys how to actually do the same, because it's really quite easy if, you know, you're interested in this type of stuff. But anyways, back to it. So the 2020s slowed down in the beginning in terms of reference tracks that would leak online, but at the same time, the inspiration behind Drake's music kind of seemed to dwindle. Projects started sounding more and more formulaic, until, in my opinion, we got Her Loss, his collaboration project with 21 Savage. This album introduced a somewhat new sound for Drake while also going back to the basics in terms of some hard-hitting bangers, some decent love songs, and some tracks where he's actually spitting. Now, again, this was a collab with 21 Savage, so they did a little interview in promotion of the project, and in that interview, they had an interesting quote. 21 Savage had said, "I'm not even gonna lie, Drake wrote some of my verses on this album. I don't give a F about what anybody say. Drake helped me with some of my verses on this project." And Drake responded by saying, "By the way, you also helped me out with some stuff too. I just thought it was interesting that 21 Savage wanted to emphasize that, Drake was really in here writing, he even wrote some of my stuff. But what was also interesting about that project was the actual contribution we heard from some other real writers. We had Lil Yachty, whose actual reference track leaked for the Drake song Jumbotron Poppin', where again, same exact flow, cadence, lyrics, etc. Drake just took Lil Yachty's reference track and re-copy pasted it into the studio for himself. Yachty also has a writing credit on the song Back Outside Boys, which, judging by the sound of that record, I can only imagine it was the same situation as the Jumbotron song. Same cadence, same flow, same lyrics, hand-delivered from Lil Yachty straight to Drake. Now, another mysterious writer was credited on the second track of this Her Loss album, to Shane Thompson. Sorry for mispronouncing that name. He also goes by the name of Beam. Now, you might recognize the name Beam in Kendrick's song Euphoria, where he rapped, "It's not a 20v1, it's a 1v20 if I gotta smack the guys that write with you. Bring them out too, I'll clean them out too, tell Beam that he better stay right with you." Of course, Kendrick here is referencing one of Drake's writers, Beam, but this is where it kind of gets weird. Remember how on 616 in LA, Kendrick also insinuated that OVO might have been working for him. There might have been a mole within the OVO camp feeding Kendrick information. After their beef ended, we saw a slew of different reference tracks leak online, as well as over a dozen random Drake songs leak, and as far as we know, they weren't by him. And this is just very strange because who in Drake's camp is all of a sudden, after this Kendrick beef, getting all these songs released to the public? Well, that's a question for another video. It's just strange that we never saw such a large amount of Drake leaks happen until the Kendrick beef. Now, one of these leaked songs contained a feature from Central C, and it was called Trump Tower. This leaked about a month ago. But a month later, one of Beam's producers, remember Beam is someone who wrote on Drake's Her Loss album, the guy who Kendrick mentions in Euphoria, his producer Dim Crux gets on Instagram and posts a bunch of random cryptic videos that seem to be Beam reference tracks. Tracks that Beam recorded, with some of them being labeled For All the Dogs, a bunch of others having random different names. Now, of all these reference tracks, Dim Crux also leaked Beam's reference track for the song that leaked from Drake, Trump Tower. So now we officially know that this leaked Drake record was actually written by someone else. But it gets spookier. See, remember the goalpost was moved again. If a writer is credited on a song, it's not a ghostwriter, right? Well, if Beam was really writing on For All the Dogs, like Dim Crux is implying, he was not credited on that project. That would mean that at the very core of the definition of a ghostwriter, Beam would have been ghostwriting for Drake, but it gets a lot stranger. I'm going to show you guys a slideshow of a bunch of different stories that Dim Crux was posting onto Instagram. I don't know if this means that Drake had a falling out with Beam and his team, or if this guy's just crashing out, but along with leaking the Beam reference track for the Drake song, he's also claiming or implying that a lot of spooky stuff had gone on within Drake's home. I'll let you guys read through this thing. It gets very weird. According to Rap Genius, Beam was also credited on Drake's song Rich Flex and his collaboration with the Migos, Having Our Way. Now all of a sudden, it looks like Beam's producer is looking for revenge on Drake and threatening to expose not just a bunch of reference tracks that Beam had recorded for Drake, but also some sketchy information about what he knows behind the scenes. And ultimately, I bring all this up to say there have been plenty of instances throughout Drake's tenure within the game where we have seen many disgruntled artists work with him and either not get the proper credit they deserve, sometimes have to settle in lawsuits, sometimes get beaten up, like Drum or Detail, sometimes feel like they were robbed of their early work, like The Weeknd, sometimes feel like they were put in intense studio camps, like Majid Jordan, some of them describing as their work with Drake as the darkest period of their career, like Quentin Miller, and some of them having their team, like Beam, completely fall out with Drake and threaten to expose the entire empire. But my question to you is, with all these different reference tracks, all this different help that Drake has obviously gotten throughout his entire career, is it time to finally admit that this goes beyond just the occasional help with a melody or a hook that some rappers may have? This is a deep-rooted history in one artist attempting to conquer all genres and taking from a plethora of different artists in the process in order to accomplish that mission, without necessarily giving them the proper credit they deserve, while still trying to label himself as a strong MC. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next one.